I'm going to talk to you about the student activism. But when one talks about the student activism, one has the impression that things are going to be only about politics and students demonstrating against oppression and indignity, like it happened in Tiananmen, like it happened in Paris in the 60s, like it happened in the States when the students were protesting against the Vietnam War. But this is not the kind of student activism I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about a different kind of student activism. I want to talk to you about the student activism which is focused on the university. It happens at the university. It is about university education, and it has to do with the purpose and the quality that the student education has at university level. Now, but before I tell you more about this kind of activism, that is what my talk is focused on, I want to explain you where I'm coming from in this type of reflections. As you can see from my accent, I'm not local. I was born in Argentina, and I studied at the University of Buenos Aires my first degree in history. The public higher education system in Argentina is based on the notions of university autonomy and academic freedom. But those principles were absolutely crushed between 1976 and 1983 when a military dictatorship took over the ruling of the country. So for the most part of my undergraduate education, that took 5 years, I was a student under a military government. What did that mean for us? First of all, it means that there was police presence at the university. It also meant that every type of political activity was banned. It meant also that the most progressive teachers at the university have resigned, went on exile, were imprisoned, or have been simply fired. So, in a sense, we did not know, we were trapped in a system. One thing that it is very interesting about dictatorships, whether they are on the right or on the left, is that the notion that power is knowledge becomes transparent. So the syllabus that we were being taught at the university was actually the military dictatorship idea of what was worth teaching, what it was that we had to teach. So what do we did in front of that? The military had banned books, has banned plays, had banned songs, had banned everything that they didn't think that was important for us or that was subversive in the name of God, in the name of the fatherland, and in the name of Western civilization. So in that context, the only option that we had was to do what we call intellectual defiance. Intellectual defiance meant that we were looking for the knowledge that was banned. How do we do this? We organized underground reading groups. There was because of the military regime, because there was a state of emergency, you couldn't have meetings of more than 2 people. Therefore, what we did was to move away from the city of Buenos Aires, and we found a place where we could read. So through photocopies, through friends who had books, etc., we managed to read the knowledge that was banned. And we needed that knowledge. We needed that knowledge in order to be able to critique the mediocrity that was political and it was intellectual. We needed that knowledge in order to be able to critique our own position and our own circumstances. So, during those periods, we learned about the things that we could have been taught at the university had the university been different. We knew and we learned about debates that were taking place in other places. We knew about the kind of discussions that were happening in the rest of Latin America, in Europe, in Africa, about the social sciences and about all our disciplines. That had an important function for us, because thanks to that, we were able to start preparing ourselves for the future. What was the point of that future? First of all, as the military government started weakening and the opening for a proper democracy started happening, we ran the first unauthorized SRC election in the country. And the main point of that election was trying to change the manner in which we were being taught. So the first task of the new SRC was precisely the critique of the curriculum. What we did was to organize ourselves in teams based on our disciplines in order to critique the curriculum that our teachers have been giving us during all those years. And the other big point was to be able to rethink what was the role that the university has in society and what was the role that university education has for the future of a country. So, how does one think about this in relation to now? This is many years ago. How does this thing relate to us now? How does this thing relate to South Africa and to any student in any part of the world who is involved in higher education? Universities are historical institutions. Universities do not exist in abstract and independently from the social, cultural, and political reality of the countries in which they are functioning. So, in that sense, we need to understand that universities now are just as not neutral as they were when I was studying, or as universities were under apartheid. So, what does this mean? This means that one of the things that we have to do is to try and understand and unpack where do we stand in relation to our universities. In this sense, the student activism that I want to talk about, that I want to enthuse people about, is defined precisely by the manner in which students stand in relation to university education. This is not something to which you as a student are indifferent, neutral, or passive. This is something that defines your life, and as such, you cannot be passive in relation to this. Now, some years ago, I had the opportunity of being part of a team of people who were responsible for assessing the quality of higher education institutions in the country. That gave me an extraordinary opportunity to meet with almost every single SRC in the country, and also with hundreds and hundreds of students. During these visits, we learned about the different realities of every single public university in South Africa, and also of the very different circumstances of different students at these universities. I am proud of the fact that I met during these trips and these visits some of the future leadership of the country. I met the students that were switched on, smart, knowledgeable, and ready to be committed. And actually, I felt hopeful in the future of this country because of those young people. And we were moved in many levels about and because the commitment of those students. But I must admit that there was also a downside of this. I could count with the fingers on one hand, the students that actually were sufficiently knowledgeable about the quality of the programs that they were studying at the university. I could count on the fingers of one hand the students that actually were more preoccupied about the politics of the country and the politics of their own education than about first-year batches, the budget of the SRC, what were going to be their allowance, and what kind of self-fund they were going to get. So that creates a problem. The most devastating experience that I had during those days was a student who, when was asked about why they were spending so much money in the first-year batch, told me that he was a poor rural student and he did not know any other way of having fun. That answer was devastating. It was devastating on 3 counts. First, because it showed system failure. The university had been singularly unable to shake that student, to allow that student to reflect on his position and try and think, what does he have to do to change it? The second one was failure because the student did not have agency. He incarnated the helplessly and the lack of hope of a person without agency. And third, and most sad of all, here it was, a student leader, 10 years into the democracy of this country, putting across an argument that was about reproducing the deficit model on which apartheid was built. What does a university have to say to this student? Does the university have an obligation to teach this student a profession, a job, to take him out of poverty? Of course it has. But it has to do much more than that. It has to teach this student to think about his situation. It has to teach this student how to think about poverty itself and what his responsibility might be in relation to the alleviation of poverty and changing the reality of the country. So, how do we think about universities today? Universities today are fixed on the notion that they have to produce graduates for the market. They are fixed on the idea that graduates have to fit in the world as the world is. They think that graduates need to be able to develop solutions for problems, but within the parameters in which the world is accepted to function. So, what is student activism now? To challenge the university. Universities need to be challenged to challenge the world. And this is the kind of activism that I think students should have today in our world. In this context, I want to talk to you about 5 rights and responsibilities that the students have in relation to their university education. First of all, students have the right to enter the knowledge offered at the university. It's not enough that you enter the university. You need to enter the knowledge that the university offers to you. But in this regard, you need to make the university accountable. You need to hold the university accountable. A professor that tells you that you need to study 5 pages to pass a test, and you are happy because you are being given that particular information, is trashing this right of yours. And it is your obligation not to complain because the professor didn't tell you how many pages you have to study, but to be angry because the professor is giving you the answers instead of asking you to have important questions. You have the right to be taken out of comfort zone. You need the right to be awakened. You need the right to be provoked, and you have the right to be changed. So don't let any university treat you as a client that is always right. You have the right to disrupt the knowledge and the relationships on which universities are based. And you need to use that all the time. You need the right to examine the ideas that are given to you. Doesn't matter where they come from or who have told them. And you need to test those ideas for the meaning that they have, for their consequences, and for their consistency. You have the right to think longer and more complex thoughts than the one that technology prescribes. You can't think longer than the tweet. Challenge yourself to do that. This is your right. So, what do? We need to remind ourselves, each student is a citizen. Every citizen is a leader, and every leader is, or should be, a role model. So what do we need to do in this context? Challenge yourself. Challenge yourself against racism, challenge to fight against violence, gender violence, challenge yourself to fight against accumulation, against injustice, against the lack of representation, but fundamentally, challenge yourself. Now, the university has responsibilities towards you, has a responsibility to make you into a competent professional, but also has a responsibility of making you into a discerning human being. It has a responsibility to teach you a subject or a profession, but also to allow you for the possibility of doing other things. It has a responsibility to teach you to do useful things, but also to do good things and to be good to yourself. It has the responsibility to teach you how to be successful individually, but also has the responsibility of teaching you how to be social and how to be responsible for a social good. You, all of you, are co-constructors of the quality of your education together with the university. And this is very important. But the university is co-constructor with you of the capacity that you have to be a leader. So for you to realize our hopes and your hopes tomorrow, you need to be able to live your capacity for leadership today. Thank you very much.